Okay, let's record another league here. I'm actually already one match into this, but I need some more video content, so I'm going to do a post game commentary on the first match. I hope that's okay. Yeah, but what I'm basically trying to do here is trying to see how the Obosh build does again. You know, I really didn't actually go that deep into the traditional Obosh angle of attack back when I did. I think I went five. I think I went 4-1. Well, I think I went 3-2, then 4-1, then 5. I can't remember the order of events, but I know I got a 5-0. I know I got at least 1-4-1, I think. But then I got a 2-3. And then for some reason, I guess I kind of, that piqued my interest in seeing if I could make like a really killer companionless version again. And, you know, and definitely I have had, I think I got 2 trophies since then with companionless versions. So there definitely is something to say there for sure. And actually, I do think the companionless versions have a lot of merit. And they might even be better in a way. They might even be quote unquote better. And you know, it's just that, you know, like what is better or not is a little bit of a tricky thing. And let me explain. See, one of the issues I'm having with the companionless versions is just that they feel a little tricky sometimes because, you know, you don't have like a super powerful companion like Obosh to kind of like completely take over the mid to late game all on its own. It's not like odd guaranteed card advantage that's always in your hand. You know, like it's not automatically something you can do every single game if you flood out. Now, granted, you know, the companionless version has you know, a Shatter Skull Smashing, which is kind of a nice thing you can do if you flood out. But of course, you know, that can be discarded. That, you know, sometimes you just got to play it as a land, so like you don't really get the mana sink kind of element to it. Sometimes you're not really playing many creatures or planeswalkers, and it doesn't really come up that way. But like, you know, yeah, so like I really like the companionless version, and actually it might be better in the sense that I feel like it's more flexible. You have better sideboard options. You're not as hamstrung in what you can play and what you can't. Um, Also, Soulfire Immolator is really excellent, and I 100% would play that in an Obosh version if somehow somehow that did not turn off Obosh, which of course, you know, contradicts the very premise. But I'm just saying that like the only reason I'm playing Soulscar in this particular build rather than Immolator is simply because it's simply to, you know, turn on the ability to have Obosh as a companion. I have gotten to the point where I've played enough with Immolator to know that it is excellent. I know that there's still some people on the fence. That's fine. 2 mana is literally twice as much as 1 mana, but what you get for that extra mana is really quite a lot. Being able to also be a burn spell is a lot, and I find that the difference between 1 and 2 mana is just oftentimes not significant enough. It doesn't usually change the clock that much, because usually you're not fully unloading anyway until the 3rd turn at the earliest, if not the 4th turn. I don't find that, yeah, you know, starting to attack on turn 3 really changes the clock all that much. That being said, we're not here to talk about the Palace version. We're here to discuss this version, and you know, so I kind of tinkered around with some different variations, but I think I just went 4-1 with a very similar list. I think the only difference is I was playing Pithing Needles, I think, instead of Pyrite Spellbomb, and I was playing Pillage instead of Shattering Spree, and I went 4-1. It did feel like it did feel pretty powerful. Yeah, and the same exact main deck configuration, just different sideboard. I didn't exactly run into actually any decks with pro-red creatures, but I did sort of like halfway into the league realize that I was super soft to burn, particularly because Core Firewalker was kind of a big problem, like, you know, relying on Oblivion Stone. I mean, to talk about, like, you know, relying on a nuclear bomb to swat a fly, you know, like, Oblivion Stone is great, but you're not exactly bringing this in to deal with Core Firewalker, if you know what I mean. I mean, like, it can deal with Core Firewalker, but like, you know, it's kind of more of a general purpose, like, you know, transformational controlling / mid range type card that like for when you're firmly trying to take more of the mid range or control role rather than being the aggro. It's, you know, the fact that it can kill pro-red creatures is kind of incidentally nice, but like, you know, definitely you kind of have a hole in your strategy if this is your answer to pro-red creatures. So I was kind of like, that's kind of a big hole. I did like Pillage a lot, but see, the thing is, I know this sounds strange, and I know some of you guys might have a hard time relating to this, but you know, like I had Pithing Needle in the previous version, like I said, instead of Pyrite Spellbomb, and I had Pillage instead of Shattering Spree. But like, see, the reason why I felt more comfortable to play Pillage was because I was playing the Pithing Needles, and it's just, believe it or not, with Aether Vial decks, I really find that it's very helpful and sometimes very necessary to just deal with those Aether Vials in the first like couple turns. You know, definitely before turn 3, and ideally multiple of them, because you know, in a decent chunk of the games, they're going to drop 2 or even 3 Aether Vials. Of course, if they drop 3 Aether Vials, sometimes they're kind of threat light because they may have more Aether Vials than creatures at that point. But dropping 2 Aether Vials is extremely common. It's actually yeah, it's very common. And Pillage, of course, only deals with 1 Aether Vial. By the time you have 3 mana, it's almost kind of like defeats the purpose to Pillage an Aether Vial, because like, it already put like 1 or 2 creatures into play. You have to waste your entire turn to deal with it. They could even put a 3-drop creature into play by the time you can Pillage, or I guess it would be 2, assuming you didn't miss land drops. But yeah, let's see, because if you're on the draw and they have 3 lands, and then you draw your 3rd land, yeah, they would still be on 2 because they had to take 1 turn off taking up. Obviously, it doesn't get a charge counter as soon as it comes into play. How crazy would that be? Anyway, long story short, the main reason you want to deal with Aether Vial is, number 1, to prevent like a creature barrage from sprawling out of control. Obviously, we have a lot of creature control, but like, at the end of the day, Aether Vial is just so powerful, and really, I think underappreciated. I definitely do appreciate it. I play Merfolk. I think Aether Vial is the number 1 reason why Merfolk actually is justifiable, and I actually think it is presently a strong deck, and I hope to get back to it in the not too distant future. But make no mistake, like, Aether Vial will overpower even a deck with this many 1-drop removal spells. Aether Vial also being able to play at speed is a big problem for cards like Flame Slash. Like, it's just it just is so good at it makes creature decks that otherwise would be almost buys, like Humans, for example. And I like Humans as a deck. I think it's very well made. It's it's somewhat similar to a deck I hold near and dear, with Merfolk. So I'm not trying to dish the deck at all, but the reality is without Aether Vial, Humans is basically like a buy with a deck like this. But that being said, solely because of Aether Vial, Humans has a much higher win percentage against this deck than it has any business being. Particularly in Game 1. And the main reason I identified why Humans has there's 2 actually reasons why Humans has a better win percentage in Game 1, a much better win percentage than Game 2. But I think the number 1 reason is that we don't really have a clean, good answer to Aether Vial, and they can just overwhelm us and play like a bunch of stuff at instant speed. So like, it makes our Flame Slash just more clunky. They can like drop Thalia, like, after I guess we don't play Light Up the Stage anymore, but they can like drop Thalia at a strange time. It makes us second guess ourselves when we attack. Just solely because of Aether Vial, it just really complicates things. Oh yeah, and most importantly in Game 1, it plays around Blood Moon, so Blood Moon doesn't like automatically win the game. Even if it does shut off some creatures, I mean, they still drop some. You have to take off an entire turn to play Blood Moon. So with an Aether Vial in play, or 2 from a Humans player, like, oftentimes, you drop in Blood Moon, and then they just drop like 1 or 2 creatures into play in a turn. They drop some more in their turn, and next thing you know, they're attacking with too much damage, and you either die or you go way too low in life that you can't really survive the next turn. So either way, point is primarily it's because of Aether Vial that you lose. That you actually, I actually think the deck may even have like a slightly lower than 50% win rate against Humans in Game 1. I know that might be shocking, but I'm not afraid to admit it. I try to be objective, but the reality is like, I do have a very good win rate against Humans, but that's because the win rate is exceptionally high in Games 2 and 3, mostly because, believe it or not, mostly because you can deal with Aether Vial in Games 2 and 3. But of course, the other reason why Humans does much better in Game 1 is because like, sometimes you keep hands with, like, say, 3 Monastery Swiftspears and like a seasoned Pyromancer or something. And like, those hands are great against control, but like, that hand's going to get steamrolled against Humans. You need to have like a bunch of burn against Humans. Their core creature strategy steamrolls. They're like, basically their creatures steamroll ours, but our burn spells steamroll their creatures. So like, a burn heavy hand will generally beat Humans, but a creature heavy hand will generally not. And the problem is, since you don't know what you're up against in Game 1, that is another reason why Game 1 gets dropped much more than I would like. Despite the fact that the deck is, in a way, almost conceptually built to beat decks like Humans. And it's but the fact that, like, probably the even bigger problem is Aether Vial does, I think, this gets me to a point. This is why I like Shattering Spree. Also, Tron is on the rise. And for similar reasons, you know, being able to hit a turn 1 Expedition map or a turn 1 you know, chromatic star or sphere. And yes, I said star. Obviously, sphere is better. If you see it, you definitely Shattering Spree it on sight. Reason being is that they will most likely be playing another Tron land and Sylvan Scrying the next turn. They don't always do that, but essentially, most Tron players know by now that they have to mulligan until they can get turn 3 Tron. And the two ways they get turn 3 Tron are turn 1 map, you know, or turn 1 star or sphere into turn 2 Sylvan Scrying. There's just really not that other consistent ways they get to Tron. Yes, they could also play, you know, Ancient Stirrings, which, you know, like hitting a star may or may not work because they may just drop another one. So sphere is obvious because they don't even draw a card off of it, but most of the time you should probably be Shattering Spreeing a star 2, because even though they draw a card off of it, it's going to mess with their mana. It's going to turn them off. I mean, because they won't be able to like play Sylvan Scrying on turn 2. Like even if they drew a card from it, even if you're down a card, they're going to have to play another sphere or star, and then they won't be able to crack that for mana until the next turn, or they'll have to take a land drop off to drop a forest. Either way, Shattering Spree on the play or draw can take them off of their ability to get turn 3 Tron. Of course, it doesn't do anything against natural Tron, but you know, you can't literally, unfortunately, you know, without Cleansing Wildfire, at least for me, or you know, there's no real way to take them off turn 3 Tron. Yes, you could play Ghost Quarter, but that doesn't count because if you have to Ghost Quarter, then yes, you're taking them off turn 3 Tron, but you're also taking yourself off your turn 3, or you're, you know, making your land drop. So like, they end up making effectively turn 3 Tron anyway, because their turn 3 just becomes their turn 4, but your turn 3 also becomes your turn 4. So like, yeah, Ghost Quarter doesn't count. Yeah, I mean, like, I do miss Pillage though. I mean, you know, I won a game against Death Shadow because I was able to pick off their basics actually before Blood Moon came down with Pillage, and then Blood Moon came down and basically just completely shut them off. You know, I mean, I'll see how the matchup plays without the ability to do that. That did definitely win me a game or two. I can't remember if it was 2 or 1, but it did definitely at least win me one game against Death Shadow. So I know that strategy does have potential power. I will say though that sometimes in the past, the Pillages have rotted in my hand if I've never drawn a Blood Moon, because you know, if you never draw a Blood Moon, taking them off a random basic here or there is actually pretty terrible, pretty objectively terrible. So if you draw the Blood Moon, then suddenly that becomes like a killer combo. But if you never draw the Blood Moon, you know, so like there could have been an element of luck to that too. But we'll see if the Death Shadow matchup is still favorable, even without access to the Pillage. Total lock sideboard plan. The Oblivion Stones that really helped out in that matchup too. So hopefully they'll do that again. Bottom line is, and of course, you know, Taxes decks are on the rise, and I love being able to randomly tag both like a Sword of Fire and Ice and a random Aether Vial sitting around, or sometimes there's like a clue token from a Thraben Inspector, or you know, like, yeah, there's just like a lot of, they play a lot of artifacts, let's just put it that way. Or sometimes you even hit a Batterskull and a Sword of Fire and Ice. Sometimes a Sword of Fire and Ice equipping a Batterskull token. I mean, like, yeah, that doesn't usually happen, but like, believe me, it's actually close to the norm, I'd say. That Shattering Spree will tag at least like another stray Aether Vial or some other random artifact out of some kind of Taxes deck, together with like the main artifact that's bothering you. Bottom line is, Shattering Spree is very good, and if I'm not playing Pithing Needle to shut down a turn 1 Aether Vial, I kind of like having access to Shattering Spree so that I can do that, because I do not count Pillage as a good plan to deal with Aether Vial, whereas Shattering Spree is. I know that was quite a long rant, but that's one reason why. I know a lot of you keep asking why I play Shattering Spree, and like, isn't Pillage just better? Shattering Spree does have a lot of applications. It's better than it looks, and I actually do even think it's better against Green Tron. I mean, yeah, Pillage is very good against Tron, but the problem is it doesn't prevent them from getting turn 3 Tron. So like, anyway, it's pretty close though with Pillage, because you know, games 2 and 3 Pillage is a lot better because they're much better equipped to deal with Blood Moon than they are to you taking them off of one of their Tron lands. Anyway, that's enough talk about Shattering Spree. Never leave home without some type of artifact hate. Yes, you know, you still have to deal with Chalice of the Void, but also yes, other random artifacts like from Taxes and other decks. You know, you need them. You know, trust me on that one. And if you don't play any artifact decks, remember, it's like an umbrella. You know, sometimes you have to take your umbrella so that it doesn't rain, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and of course, Relic of Progenitus. We all know that very well. I don't think any more introduction is needed for Relic of Progenitus. It's proven like best graveyard hate. You know, unless you're like in black, and even so, probably it's the best graveyard hate. maybe other than Neil Spellbomb. Sometimes even better because it's like it also is good against Tarmogoyf. Anyway, I'm not gonna rehash the old point on that one. Oblivion Stone. I don't know what to say other than that I kind of want a very powerful 2-of that can help me shore up some problematic matchups, like for example Boggles or like I don't know Pillowfort Enchantress, like with like Solemnity combo and stuff. I don't know. I am not playing with what's it called Blast Zones this time, so I'm a little softer to enchantments like Shaper Sanctuary or like the aforementioned Pillowfort or other enchantment heavy decks. So I mean like it's the thing is I'm going to explain this in a moment, but I really like Pyrite Spellbomb. And basically, because I want to play 4 Pyrite Spellbombs in the mix, I've only got 2 more slots to work with. So basically, I narrowed it down to either Kozilek's Return or Oblivion Stone. And I'm choosing Oblivion Stone because it just covers more bases. It both deals with Token Swarm with multiple pro-red creatures and all the same stuff that Kozilek's Return does, but it also deals with enchantments, also other artifacts too. It can supplement Shattering Spree, and like literally everything, of course, at the cost of costing a total of 8 mana, 3 mana first and then 5 mana, which actually makes it a lot more playable than if it was just 8 mana total, then it'd be completely unplayable. I mean, all at once that is. But since you can pay the 8 mana and a 3 and then 5 mana installment, it's actually quite. I mean, we can play it as easily as Tron can play. Can play Oblivion Stone by turn 5 as well. I mean, activated that is. And the thing is, this like I definitely know people are going to be very curious. Like this seems like it has no place in the deck. Trust me, like I'm not saying that this is like objectively the best card for this slot, but trust me, it's not bad. It is good. I mean, is it like the best possible option? That's what we're trying to find out. But I have tested it enough to know that this is a good card in the matchup. I mean, in the archetype. I know I know that's surprising. I know like that must be really surprising. But the reality is there's a ton of matchups. First of all, there's a number of matchups where you'll take any enchantment or any pro red or any type of hate you can get that any other options and just base red just won't deal with. So first of all, there's that. And second of all, and more importantly, there's just a lot of matchups, maybe even more than 50%, where we're actually not the aggro, where we're actually taking the more like mid-range or control role. And in probably a majority of those matchups, Oblivion Stone actually is pretty good because it's kind of like an inevitable, like super Wrath of God type effect that a lot of times the opponent can't come back from once you activate it. And especially when you can side out more creatures for games 2 and 3, so you almost become like a control deck. I know it's surprising, but like you can, and there's just a lot of matchups where you do that anyway. And Oblivion Stone just kind of slots pretty easily into that kind of transformational-ish sort of strategy you sometimes go for in games 2 and 3. Oftentimes go for actually. And we'll see if that comes up at all in the games. And that takes us to the last card on the sideboard. And I guess I do have to just discuss the main deck a little bit too. I don't know how I exactly started with the sideboard first, but Pyrite Spellbomb. To say I've been impressed with this card in some of the companionless versions that I've tried is an understatement. It's honestly main deckable, and I would actually try to squeeze it in the main deck if I just wasn't really liking the raw power of Flame Slash. So like it's kind of either Flame Slash or this in the main deck. If I probably play this, I probably play Flame Slash in this slot. Or I mean, like it's entirely possible that you could swap the Flame Slashes and the Pyrite Spellbombs. But I'm inclined to think that in your average matchup, Flame Slash being cheaper and dealing more damage is probably better than having the option to cycle, because the Pro Red usually won't come up in game 1. Although some decks, cough Heliod, they are jerks and they play main deck Pro Red creatures. that's quite annoying. But anyway, to say Pyrite Spellbomb is impressive is an understatement. It's just good, clean, efficient removal for Pro Red creatures. But it's also just another burn spell. You will cycle it a lot. Sometimes you got to hit your land drop. Sometimes you got to dig for another Seasoned Pyromancer. Sometimes you have like say 3 mana and you've got like 2 prowess creatures, and they're at like say 8 life, and Pyrite Spellbomb only gets you to 6 damage if you crack it. You play Pyrite Spellbomb, trigger 2 prowess, you attack for 4, you blow it for 2, and then they're still at 2 life. Whereas cycling it gives you the ability to possibly produce more damage because you play it, you cycle it. You attack. I mean, you have like 2, 3 creatures, but then say you draw a Lava Dart or a Firebolt, or like or if you have 1 or 3 mana, like I don't know, anything, a Blood Moon, or I guess a Blood Moon too, but like say you draw a Firebolt, then then suddenly you've got 8 damage. So my point is believe it or not, Pyrite Spellbomb actually is better than it seems. It's actually completely main deckable if you want to do that. I highly endorse anybody who wants to try to squeeze that in their main deck. Prowess. It only works in these style Prowess decks, though. Don't try it in the Reveler versions because the fact that it's not an instant or sorcery makes it completely unplayable with Reveler. But if you're using Seasoned Pyromancer as your card advantage source, then I fully endorse anybody who wants to play Pyrite Spellbomb in the main. Even if you're not dealing with pro-red creatures, just being another burn spell or a cycling card is surprisingly flexible and nice. That being said, obviously we cannot squeeze every single card into the main deck that we want. The last remaining card would probably be Pyrite Spellbomb if I could find room, but alas, here's our main deck. We are playing this amount of cards because I cannot think of how to squeeze anything else that I feel is a must-play card. Considering the fact that, yes, we are playing 24 lands. I mean, technically it's 20 lands, it says up here, but the Valakut Awakening is really a land, because we will be playing in a land like probably 80%, 85% of the time. Yeah, I mean, this deck is just very mana hungry, particularly the Obosh versions, but honestly, even the companionless versions could probably benefit from having 24 lands. Only thing is, those decks are a little more susceptible to flood, even with Shatter Skull Spashing. I mean, obviously that does help. But, like, those decks, to be fair, are a little more prone to flooding. But, thankfully, the Obosh versions, particularly with, between Seasoned Pyromancer and Obosh, flooding is usually not that huge of an issue. If they deal with Obosh or counter Seasoned Pyromancer, sometimes it is, but, it's, yeah. 24 lands I feel is justifiable, and 8 of those 24 lands cycle. One of them has super cycling, basically, so it can cash in some Flame Slashes, Blood Moons, or like against humans, for example, your Swiftspears, your Soulscar Mages for more burn spells. It won't come up a lot, but when you do cycle Valakut Awakening, you've usually got some other cards sitting in your hand, whether they be land or I don't know, a Lava Dart that's in a non-creature matchup where your creatures aren't sticking. Like Jund. Lava Dart's kind of mediocre against Jund because usually it's just like a kind of janky shock, because your creatures usually don't stick. So, like, you usually have some number of cards that, for whatever reason, given the matchup, aren't really doing a lot. So Valakut Awakening is really nice. I mean, sure, you only cycle it like 20 or 15% of the time, but when you do, it's pretty nice. And if nothing else, sometimes it can just cycle for 3 mana, which isn't great, but it still digs you deeper into your deck, and and the Forgotten Cave, of course, is just a cycler, and it's and like Valakut Awakening, it's fully functional under Blood Moon, and yeah, I mean, I'm only playing 16 creatures. I wanted to squeeze 20 in here. I tried playing Figure of Destiny again, but alas, can't have them all. Can't like squeeze everything I want into the deck. But that being said, I mean, we really actually kind of have 17 creatures, but actually it feels kind of like 20. Because since Obosh is always in our hand effectively, or like we can always tutor for it for 3 mana at any time, I feel like if you play a 4 in your deck, you're almost guaranteed to see one copy of it in like the first 20 cards. Well, I mean, not maybe 20 is too much, but top like maybe 15 cards. Basically once the game gets underway, so like. Yeah, I mean, so sure, like sometimes you see multiples, and sometimes you don't see them at all. But like, I feel like it kind of evens out. Like when you have a card like Obosh that you always basically can have, but of course you can never have more than one. I feel like having Obosh in the mix effectively makes the creature count about 20, because Obosh feels like a 4 because it's always effectively available to you. Anyway, like we'll see if like mostly it's against control. That it's kind of, you're kind of really itching to play more creatures, to put more pressure on. And, also like against control, you really don't want to, it's really unfortunate when you have to keep those hands that only have burn spells and Seasoned Pyromancer, for example. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes you get there, because if they don't count it as Seasoned Pyromancer, like it puts so many bodies on the table. Sometimes it's kind of hard for them to deal with. And then even if they Supreme Verdict, then you can flash back the tokens. But yeah, of course, if they counter it, then it's just kind of like, then your deck kind of just doesn't do anything, and they pick you off, slowly, which is really annoying. But, at the same time, yeah, I mean, sometimes that happens, but, you still with 8 1-drops, you're still fairly likely to see one in the first couple turns. I mean, hey, you know, traditional mono red Prowess basically only played 16 creatures too, right? I mean, sometimes only 12. I mean, some lists only played Swiftspear, Soulscar, and Bedlam Reveler. Of course, they did play more cantrips, but you know, Seasoned Pyromancer is kind of like a super cantrip too, and you know, and you can count for Cotton Cave kind of like a cantrip. Actually, you really can. You probably cycle this close to the, you know, yeah, I mean, like it's kind of like a better card in a way than like a Crash Through in this deck, because it's like a Crash Through that, sure, it doesn't trigger Prowess, but you can play it as a land, which is actually pretty big deal if you're pretty land light. Yeah, anyway, yeah, traditional mono red Prowess, I mean, sometimes they usually don't even play 4 Kiln Fiends, so they usually play like somewhere between 12 and 16 creatures, usually less than 16. You know, and of course we have a companion, so, you know, we'll see. I think 16 is fine, but that's how I can squeeze 24 lands in, and I can't really see myself getting away from Firebolt. It's really just that it's like it's an early burn spell, it's early interaction, but also like it's card advantage and potential card advantage, and it's also just another 2 damage later in the game. So like it's great once you like get to Obosh mana and you can like start flashing it back and picking off creatures. You know, Flame Slash, like I said, it's like not perfect, but I mean, hey, it deals with most of almost any creature that they can throw at you. It only costs 1. It literally will basically kill anything other than, like, you know, the big Eldrazi once you have Elbosh in play. Lava Dart is, I mean, hey, you know, one of the reasons why even this deck that only has 16 creatures and 24 lands, which is definitely more on the mid-rangey type spectrum of, like, you know, Prowess variants I've played. I mean, as long as you've got Lava Dart in the mix and you've got at least 8, you know, 1 to 2 mana Prowess creatures, turn 3 kills are totally on the table, and that's mostly because of Lava Dart. Plus, it's still as good against you know, decks like Humans, any decks with lots of 1/toughest creatures. It's good at picking off Inkmoth Nexus. It's good against Heliod combo because you can fire it off at like their Mana Dorks, but then later on it still helps deal with their Spike Feeder or Walking Ballista combo. And the main really nice thing is that you don't have to hold mana up while it's just sitting in your graveyard, you know, deterring the combo. So, I mean, you know, I think we all know Lava Dart is pretty good. I haven't been playing it for a little while, but you know, I just really like it, and I think in this wide open meta, it's just really nice to have access to a potential turn 3 kill, and everything else Lava Dart brings to the table, and that's of course at the expense of playing another creature. But I think it's well worth it still. We'll see. We'll see if we're itching for another creature more as the games go. So far, I did, I think, get at least 1 turn 3 kill last league. Anyway, Lightning Bolt. You know, I don't think, not, you know, as the great Stanley said, enough said. Swiftspear, Soulscar. I mean, if you're playing Obosh, that's really like kind of all there is for Prowess creatures. Blood Moon, you know, still can't get away from Blood Moon, you know, like, sure, there are some matchups where it's not great, but, you know, I did try some versions without Blood Moon, but, like, for example, against Shadow, he's kind of like a big part of, especially our Game 1 strategy, is trying to turn them off from their ability to drop their life total. Bonecrusher Giant, you know, we've all seen this in action. It's a 2-mana burn spell that also helps deal with protection from red if they block. So it's good old-fashioned card advantage. Also ups the creature count. I mean, not much more to say. Especially in Obosh versions, you got to take good red creatures where you can get them, and frankly, it doesn't get that much better than Bonecrusher Giant. I mean, at least as a mid-range type card, it really doesn't. This is premium red. I mean, let me tell you, like, if I had this card back like in Odyssey when I first started playing, I'd be all over I would have been all over this card, maybe even more so than Firebolt. But like, this is definitely like a cousin of Firebolt, but I think better, but like it's fairly close. Actually, more close than people think. But yeah, it's super solid. Valakut Awakening, you know, I've already went over that. Seasoned Pyromancer, kind of once again enough said, but I mean, you know, it's like a mini Bedlam Reveler, but it's you know, you don't have to wait until turn 4 or 5. You know, like it actually helps you hit your land drops as opposed to like sometimes, you know, rotting in your hand. Especially with 24 lands, it'll be very rare that you don't hit your 3rd land drop. Yeah, I mean, I think with that, let's get into the games, or at least the first match. I'll go over that right now.